It's a somewhat new era for the Iowa Hawkeyes, and things should still be the same. This should still be a team that finds plenty of success in 2024, and it's going to be with a familiar formula. Before we dive into the Iowa Hawkeyes, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Make sure to share and like the video. It goes a long way in keeping this deep dive series alive. It's been a successful series so far, been really fun to get us ready for the season. And without further ado, let's dive into Iowa. Kirk Ferentz is still leading the show, and that shouldn't be a surprise. We were just waiting for him to retire. Now that feels like it's later rather than sooner. And we find ourselves in a new era with a new offensive coordinator. Now, whether that means improvement or not remains to be seen, but it at least gives fans some hope that things will be a little bit different. This was an offense, as obviously, like we talked about many a times last year, that struggled mightily. But Tim Lester comes in to take over, and now everyone's intrigued to see what is he going to do to make this look a little different. I think there's still going to be a lot of similarities with what Iowa wants to do, but maybe he has a few wrinkles here and there that switch things up. Phil Parker is one of the best defensive coordinators in college football, and that will be the same this year. That shouldn't change. And despite all of the talk with the offense, this is still a team that finished 10-4, and this is still very much a team that can make a similar run in 2024. So as much as people like to make jokes and bring up the shortcomings of that offense, this is still a group that had tremendous success with some of those limitations. And again, it's a formula that Iowa has that you don't have to change much. You just have to continue to find the right guys, continue to get people to buy into the culture, and you will be just fine. The transfer portal didn't really do much for Iowa, but that's not unexpected. This isn't a team that needs to hit the transfer portal. Obviously, the Caden Proctor situation hurts a little bit for the fan base, losing him after getting him for a few months or whatever time frame that actually was obviously painful to be able to get a guy like him to come back to Iowa, only for him to go back to Alabama. Hurt, but even with him gone, I don't think you have a ton to worry about if you're Iowa. It wasn't like you don't have any other options. And we'll dive into that with the offensive line. But that's probably the biggest note for this team. You didn't add anybody on defense. You added some players on offense. Brendan Sullivan is someone we'll talk about in a little bit here, but you don't add a ton of talent that's going to make a big time impact, and that's okay. I don't think that Iowa, again, needs to add a ton of talent. I think they have the right formula in place. This coaching staff knows what kind of player they want to recruit, and they have found their guys year in and year out, and that's not going to change. So the transfer portal, there's not much to talk about. You may want to talk about some of the guys that you lose, but Spencer Petras and Deacon Hill are the two quarterbacks that head out. But other than that, you don't really have too much to discuss when it comes to that. The offense, obviously, is going to be a focal point. And when you look at this team, though, I think that there's still plenty of reasons to be interested in this offense. I'm not going to say excited, but there are definitely pieces in place to improve. And again, when you're a group that finishes in the 130s for any of these categories, there's really only one direction to go. There's only one way to go, and that's up. So you don't have a ton to worry about in terms of getting worse. And you have players in place that will, I think, make this group a much better group in 2024. Caden McNamara comes back, and his health is going to be I think, the biggest factor when it comes to Iowa's offense. This is someone who is capable of making solid throws. I think he's a good quarterback when healthy. When you look at what he did at Michigan, I think that people undersold his game. I think that he is someone who is very capable of leading this Iowa offense. I don't want to say to new heights, but at least making them a respectable offense. The pass game obviously is going to be what everyone pays attention to, and Cade is the biggest factor in that because he handles the football every single play. But I think that he is much better than people give him credit for. Now, obviously, the JJ McCarthy situation forced him out of Michigan, but I think that Cade McNamara can be a solid player for Iowa and elevate the quarterback play, something they desperately needed last year and just simply didn't get, but he is someone that is capable of elevating that portion of this offense. And again, like I mentioned before, there are a lot of things that Iowa is going to do that are the same as last year. They are not going to completely change their offense just because they have a new quarterback or a new offensive coordinator, I should say. They are going to still want to run the football. They still want to be physical. And with the offensive line they have and the tight ends they have come back, that is definitely possible. And the running backs play a big role in that as well. So when you look at the talent they have returning in 2024, LaShawn Williams and Caleb Johnson are going to be solid. I think that they have great talent at the running back position, and it's just a matter of getting back to the run game that we've seen in years past. LaShawn Williams had a solid year last year. Caleb Johnson is someone the staff expects to break out a little bit more in 2024. So that's definitely a group to keep an eye on. And it'll be fun to see how that group improves. Now, when it comes to the depth behind both McNamara and then behind Williams and Johnson, you have a few players of note. The first player that we're going to talk about is Brendan Sullivan. Coming from Northwestern to Iowa isn't going to move the meter on a national scale. However, bringing in a guy like Sullivan, who was a bigger player for Northwestern, tells me that this staff is worried about Cade's health going forward. Now, his track record proves that that's just a smart decision, but also I think that it helps Iowa fans have some peace knowing that they are in good hands, even if McNamara goes down with an injury again. The running back position doesn't have a ton of proven depth behind them, but there's a lot to be excited about. This coaching staff really likes guys like Amari Malton, someone who, when LaShawn Williams was out this spring, Malton and Johnson shared the running back one duties, if you will. So he is someone that's going to factor in. He will play a bigger role this year. You also have depth behind them as well. So you have a guy like Jason Patterson. You also have Terrell Washington Jr. You have a good running back group, and it's just a matter of can you get this rushing attack back to where it needs to be, because this is a group that has plenty of talent. They have the ability to be what Iowa once was on the ground. And it's not like they've just disappeared. They just had a tough year. We'll call it what it was. It was a tough year. And the running game is obviously going to play a huge factor. But if the passing attack doesn't do its part, obviously it's not going to matter. And this is a passing attack that has some options. Now, whether or not you're going to say that they're good options is probably where the debate begins. Obviously, most of this stems from Cade McNamara's ability to get the football downfield. But a guy like Caleb Brown was a huge addition for this team last year. And I think that he is set to have a bigger year than he did in 2023. 215 yards and one touchdown. Seth Anderson is another player to keep an eye on. 150 yards and one touchdown for him. You bring in Northwestern transfer Jacob Gill, 195 yards and two touchdowns on his career. You have a bunch of different players. Caden Weston, I think that this staff believes he could be the top receiver. So despite the fact that I was not going to feature its receivers a ton this year, just like any other year, you have guys that are going to compete, and that's going to help you improve. The tight end position is what you expect from Iowa. People are still really high on Luke Lachey, even after only 10 catches for 131 yards. But again, some of that is the passing attack struggles and not necessarily indicative of his abilities. Addison Ostrenga is a player to watch as well, someone who will play a bigger role in this offense than he did last year. You also have solid depth at the tight end position behind them. Gavin Hoffman, the freshman, is someone to keep an eye on there as well. So this is going to be, if all goes right, this will be a familiar formula, and it's one of those where you are capable of improving because you have the right formula. It's just kind of the opposite of what a lot of teams have. The offensive line will be set. It's just going to come down to what the skill positions can do, which is kind of weird to say, but it's also what Iowa needs to be successful and to improve on an offense that was pretty bad last year. You have to do certain things differently and you have to find some consistent talent. And a lot of that stems from the quarterback position, but also you still have to set the tone up front. And if there's a group that's going to set the tone for any team, Iowa has the right offensive line in place. And this is a really, really fun offensive line this year. We start with the tackles. Mason Richmond and Jennings Dunker are going to be the tone setters on the edge. Now, one thing to keep an eye on is Dunker is really good when he is healthy. He is someone who is very capable of being an all conference type player when he is on the field. It's just he needs to stay healthy to make that happen. If he's not able to go, Nick DeJong is someone who can step in and play right away. He has 19 games started, so he is definitely capable of picking up any slack if Dunker again goes down with an injury. The interior is just as good, arguably better than the tackles, but that's what makes this group so good. Logan Jones centers everything. Connor Colby and Bo Stevens are at guard. You have some really intriguing players behind them. Tyler Ellsbury at guard. You have Cade Barrett coming in from North Dakota. That's solid backup at center. So you have plenty of talent. You have a really good group starting up front. You have two guys in Connor Colby and Mason Richmond that are 4-year starters now this year. So you have plenty of talent, plenty of experience, and that's great for a group that wants to improve. You have the guys that know what it takes to win. You know that they are going to come out with a chip on their shoulder. They want to make sure that last year was an anomaly and that you can get back on track with where you need to be. And if there's anybody that's going to do it, it's Iowa. They have a great formula in place, despite it being kind of outdated for what college football is now. Iowa being different is what makes them good. They are not going to adapt to what everyone else is doing. They are going to continue to find the right guys, to bring in the right talent. And when it's all said and done, they are going to win football games the Iowa way. They are not going to try to adapt everyone else's game. They want to do things their own way. And that's what's going to make them great. The defense is no exception to that. This defense should still be a top 25 defense. There is nothing saying that they are going to be anything but that. And when you look at the talent around them, yeah, you have some new names, but at the same time, you have guys that know what it takes. They learn from the guys in front of them, and now they're just maybe taking on bigger roles. Deontay Craig comes back at defensive end, as does Ethan Herkett. So you look at two guys that have plenty of experience and plenty of ability to make big time plays for Iowa's defense. The defensive end position to me shouldn't take a step back because again, part of it is the formula, as does all of these players know what it takes. They know what's required of them to win football games and they've seen the formula. They know the blueprint. It's in front of them and this coaching staff. Phil Parker has done a great job of getting everyone up to speed and making sure that everyone knows what's expected of them. On the interior, you have guys like Aaron Graves and Yaya Black. Those are two guys that again have experience and are ready to go. I don't think you have too many concerns about the transition time, which is pretty big for Iowa. You have guys who are back and had plenty of experience last year. And despite some of the losses that they had around them, you have plenty of guys that know what's expected and they know how to win. And the defensive line is going to set the tone and do a lot of really exciting things, even with a couple of the losses they sustained, or and I should say, I'm really talking about the defense as a whole, but you don't lose a ton of talent. You just have to find the depth behind them because this defensive line The starters set. Don't really have too many concerns about what they can do. I think that you are in a great position. If you're Phil Parker, you know that the guys up front are going to get the job done. You know that you have the right players in place, the right leaders in place to make plays. And then it's just going to come down to what the guys behind them, the rotational players, can do. Because if you have good depth behind you, behind those starters, I should say, then you're in good hands. You don't have too many concerns, and you can rotate those guys in on a pretty regular basis. Guys like Brian Allen and Luke Gaffney are two players that stand out as players who could step up and take on bigger roles this year. You have good depth at various positions, but I think that there's some more questions on the defensive line than necessarily other positions there. That being said, as long as your starters stay healthy, you probably don't have too many concerns, and they can get those new guys up to speed and get them more comfortable in their roles. Now, if there's a trio of linebackers that are better than what Iowa has, then I would like to see it, because this is a group that is one of the best in college football, and it was the case last year, and it's going to be the case against this year again this year. These guys are so much fun to watch. Nick Jackson and Jay Higgins are probably what you would show people if you were looking for teach tape on how to play linebacker. Iowa has a tradition of putting together good tight ends, but also the linebackers they produced over the last handful of years have been something to take note of. And Jackson and Higgins are tackling machines. Jackson had 110 last year, Higgins had 171. So part of that is the defense being on the field so much, but also this is still a defense that didn't care. It does not matter how much your offense is struggling. This defense is going to hit you in the mouth, and they're not going to give up. They will not lose their will before you do. They are going to make sure that your life is miserable. And right when you think that you have them, you really don't. That's how good this team is. And obviously, a lot of that stems from what Phil Parker does as a play caller. But at the same time, you have to have the right players in place to make those plays. If you do not have a guy like Nick Jackson or Jay Higgins, even Kyle Fisher is quote unquote the worst linebacker of these three, but he is someone who is going to take on a bigger role. And I think that this coaching staff is excited to see what he can do. And he again, you're going to have teams focusing on Jackson and Higgins so much that Fisher's life should be pretty easy. Teams are going to test him, but they also have to send extra resources towards Jackson and Higgins. Also, they have to worry about this defensive line. So Kyle Fisher is probably going to get isolated a little bit more this year, but he is someone who's going to have opportunities to step up and play big. And I think that this staff really likes that opportunity. They like that for their team. And Fisher's ready to step up and make big plays. And yeah, you're going to see maybe some production go down from Jackson and Higgins, but that means that Fisher is stepping up in a big way. And that's really all this staff cares about. That's really all this defense cares about. I don't care about who's getting the most tackles, who's being the most disruptive. They want to make sure that they are giving their team every chance to win. And after that, though, that's where things are really interesting. Carson Sherrar is someone who could be in the running to play a bigger role as well. Jade Harrell is someone as well. I think that you have plenty of options if you're the Iowa Hawkeyes at the linebacker position. Jackson Rexroth is another one. It's just a matter of if Nick Jackson and Jay Higgins and Kyle Fisher can stay on the field, you probably don't have to worry about depth, but you do have to build for the future. And given that you're going to lose some of these guys after this year, you're going to have to find players that can step up and play bigger roles when it comes down to the 2025 season. But still, this linebacker group is so good. They're so fun to watch, and they're just the definition of tackling machines. And this, we talked about some losses before. Losing Cooper DeJean, it was always going to be tough to move on from. You always knew that was going to be hard. But that being said, Iowa has a secondary that is once again going to be one of the best in college football. I think that they are that good, even without Cooper DeJean. Obviously, Cooper DeJean is a great talent. You obviously expected big things from him. He produced at a high level, but you also have players that can step up in a big way. Now, you do have a couple of players that are taking on bigger roles this year, but you also have returning talent that's going to be really fun to watch. I think the two biggest names have to be Sebastian Castro at the cash position. Then you have Xavier Nwankpa, who a lot of people expect big things from, expect a bright future for him at the NFL level. And how could you not at 6'2", 210 pounds? He is just coming into his comfort zone, and it's going to be fun to see what he can do in this season. He is going to take on a bigger role, and the safety position's in good hands with him and Quinn Schulte alongside him. There's two experienced players. Yeah, you lose Cooper DeJean, but you have guys that are coming back that will make life easier. The guy that people are going to pay attention to is John Nestor, the one who potentially will be either replacing Cooper DeJean at corner or backing up Sebastian Castro at the cash position. We will see. That's going to be a fun player to watch. I think that there's a lot of pressure on him, but I know that the staff really likes what they have in the secondary. Jamari Harris is someone who's kind of under the radar. He is an honorable mention All Big Ten player who I think is ready to take a step forward, and he has the guys around him that could take those steps with him as well. So this is a secondary that shouldn't take any steps back. In fact, it should be just as good as it was last year. And that makes this defense really good as well. Behind these guys, there's not a ton of proven depth, but there is depth. You have got plenty of guys that will step up and play if needed or be part of the rotation. The cornerback position has Deshaun Lee and Devin Hilson. You have plenty of safety depth behind those two guys in Schulte and Nwankpa. You have plenty of talent and you have the right guys in place. Again, that speaks to what this coaching staff wants to do. They want to be good at everything that they want to do defensively. They want to be good at stopping the run. They want to be good at defending the pass and getting the right guys in place that buy in to doing their job and being selfless is really what's made Iowa good. Yes, you have found some really underrated athletes that are proving to be really good at the NFL level, but it's all about the unit. It's all about the team, and it's all about making sure that it's not one individual guy making things or breaking things for this defense, and that's what's made them good. And it's a big reason why, when you look at the strengths of this team, linebacker and secondary are going to be the two biggest ones. Same with the offensive line. The strengths for Iowa, very obvious. It's pretty easy to see that you could just put the whole defense as a strength, and then besides the offensive line, the whole offense could be a concern. The running back position, I think, is pretty solid this year, so you can't really say that as much. But quarterback is going to be a concern, not because I don't think Cade McNamara is a solid player. It's just because quarterback has been a little bit of a struggle the last couple of years. And also keeping Cade healthy is going to be a huge thing. What does Brendan Sullivan do if he's thrust into the starting position? Wide receiver is going to be a question until further notice. And then play calling. This is just natural. And I almost don't like saying it, but you also kind of have to still address the elephant in the room. I think Iowa fans are getting sick of hearing that. And it's easy to see why, because it is kind of annoying. It's kind of annoying to hear that over and over again about, hey, you guys don't know how to move the ball down the field, or you don't know, your coordinator doesn't know what he's doing. And yeah, that's frustrating. But I also think you have to be excited about a new era. You have to at least accept that it's time to move on, and college football will move on eventually. You just have to get back to being able to be efficient with what you're trying to do offensively. And so that's going to be what you need to do. And until further notice, you're probably just going to have to keep hearing about it. That being said, I think things will change this year. I think that this is a Iowa team that is able to move on from its past struggles, and I think that they're in good hands. And this schedule makes it so that it could be really fun this year. This could be a special season, and this with the new Big Ten and how it's set up, this is an Iowa team that can see a path back to the Big Ten championship game. Over under is set at 7.5 wins. To me, the ceiling is 10-2. The floor is 6-6. When you look at what this team has, if things are going well, Illinois State is definitely a win. Iowa State will be a tough game, but that's a game that Iowa is capable of winning. Troy is going to be a win. Unless Minnesota has taken a step forward, that should be a win. So that's a 4-0 start. Then you go to Ohio State. That is going to be tough, probably going to be a loss, regardless of how well Iowa is playing. Washington should be in a little bit of a down year. That should be a win. At Michigan State should be a win. Northwestern should be a win. Wisconsin's obviously tough. At UCLA could be tough, but also could be a win. At Maryland, we'll see what Maryland looks like, but that should be a win. Nebraska is going to be tough this year. So if Iowa is playing well, you see a lot of winnable games on that schedule. You have a ton of games that you can win. And if that offense takes a step forward, you feel really good about the odds of that being 10 and closer to 10-2 than it is 6-6. That being said, this defense has a breaking point. It's going to have a breaking point regardless. And it's just a matter of what does the offense do to help it out? Because if you're able to slow teams down, that's fine. But if you can't ever put points on the board and rely on your defense to win low scoring games, eventually you're going to break. And especially with some of the teams that they're going to play. Teams like Iowa State is going to be tough. That is a team that is going to be explosive offensively. Minnesota could be much better. That is a team that expects to take a step forward this year after a tough season. Ohio State can do a lot of damage. Washington, despite the losses they sustained, has talent to make some moves there. Michigan State is ready to break out of their slump that they've been in. Wisconsin could be a better offense. UCLA is kind of underrated and unknown right now. Maryland's offense could be really good. Nebraska is expected to be better. You have so many teams on the schedule that could present challenges. That being said, most of them probably still aren't ready for what Iowa's bringing defensively. And if this offense, like I said, takes a step forward, that only makes things sweeter. So this is a team that is very capable of getting back to where they were last year. And this is a team that, even with some of the offensive struggles, has the defense to sustain success. And they have the ability to make things really exciting. And if you're an Iowa fan, there's probably not a ton that offensively is going to get you too excited, but you also have to keep in mind that this should be a better group in 2024. This should be a better team overall, but you're not going to see a ton of improvement on the defense just because that's how good they were. If you see an improvement on the defense, which is possible, but I just don't think you'll see that this group sustain their success more than improve. But if the offense can take a step forward, then Iowa is in business, and that Ohio State game could be much different than we're anticipating, and makes this team a really exciting one to watch this season.